He didn't inspire fear. He didn't look dangerous, nor did he walk with aggression, but something about him didn't fit. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, as if every step had already been decided. His black overcoat clung to his body like a living shadow. His pants, worn and frayed, spoke of a time that had stretched too long. His boots, wide and heavy, struck the ground with a measured rhythm, as if he carried a sentence with every step. But it wasn't his clothes that stood out the most. It was his eyes. If you looked at them long enough, you might find a trace of humanity, but there was something more. Have you ever tossed a coin into a wishing well? His eyes were something like that. A deep abyss where it was impossible to find hope in the darkness and emptiness. A place without light or shine. Eyes blackened by misery or perhaps by time. They were the eyes of an ancestor in the body of a young man. It wasn't pity you felt when you saw them. It was the same feeling that comes when you remember that all beauty perishes, that every spring has an inevitable end. He walked beside the highway, where cars were nothing but fleeting shadows cutting through the darkness without stopping. The air was thick with humidity and the sour stench of rotting trash. The alleyways exhaled the acrid smell of urine and homeless bodies. In the distance, the hoarse cry of a baby drowned in the city's indifference. On the sidewalks, misery wore many faces. An old man with cracked lips picked up a half-smoked cigarette and lit it with trembling fingers. Farther ahead, a group of addicts lay collapsed in a heap of motionless bodies, faces covered in sores, pupils dilated into the eternity of chemical oblivion. A ragged woman muttered incoherent words while hugging a supermarket bag as if it were a child. None of this fazed Saturn. It was part of the scenery, part of the machinery of a city that devoured itself night after night, until he saw her, an element that didn't belong, something out of place, between a grimy restaurant and a warehouse with flickering lights, in a narrow space between two crumbling, concrete walls. There was something the night had not yet swallowed. She was small. It was cold, yet she wore only a thin white dress, far too fragile for this world. She curled up with her knees pressed against her chest, her long black hair covering her face like a veil. She made herself tiny, invisible, as if she knew that the night had no mercy. Saturn stopped. For the first time in a long while, something disrupted the script he followed. Something didn't fit, and for the first time in a long while, Saturn walked briskly. He crouched before her, studying her with the weight of a silent judgment. "Who are you?" he asked. The girl slowly lifted her head. Her skin was impossibly pale, as if the filthy air of the city dared not touch her. Her cheeks were rosy, her lips small, her eyes large and clear. She did not belong to this place. She did not belong anywhere. "Who am I?" she repeated softly. "I don't know." Saturn examined her. For a moment he thought she was playing with him. But no, there was something more. Something that shouldn't be there. "What are you doing here?" The girl tilted her head as if the question itself was strange. "I don't know," she said simply. "I never thought to ask. Where do you come from? Do you have a home?" She furrowed her brow slightly, searching for an answer in the void. "I think I only began to exist the moment you approached me. Before you, there was nothing." Saturn's mind tensed. That was impossible. He knew every point, every link in the chain. His journeys were meticulous, his encounters written before they even happened. But the source had never spoken of her. She wasn't in the records. She wasn't supposed to exist. Yet she did. "I'm hungry," the girl said. And then the impossible happened. Saturn smiled, a barely perceptible movement, but real. Something inside him, something that had been buried beneath centuries of repetition and resignation, stirred, if only for a moment. "Would you like to be a doll?" he asked. The girl blinked. "What kind?" "A wool one. Soft, small enough to fit in my pocket." She nodded with the same certainty with which a river follows its course, as if there was already a bond between them, something beyond time and space. "What's your name?" Saturn asked. "I don't have one. Would you give me one?" Saturn tilted his head slightly. "Luna. Your name will be Luna."